Hey friends, welcome back to MPL Weekly. I'm Becca Scott, that's Marshall Sutcliffe and Luis Scott-Vargas. Fellas, wow, we're down to what could possibly be our final match of the day. Who knows if that'll pan out that way, but we are down to our grand finals match coming up here pretty soon. We can see our bracket of how the day has gone. So Ben Stark, of course, won the upper finals and went straight to the grand finals there. And Reid Duke has worked his way up from the lower semifinals, just beat Andrea Mengucci on Esper Control, and now is going to face Ben on the mono blue tempo. How do these two decks compare?
Well, it's interesting because like one step beyond that, Becca, is not just how the matchup goes, but the fact that the matchup may have to happen twice. Right? If you're sitting in Reid's seat, it's not just about defeating Ben, it's about defeating him again. Ben has a massive advantage here just from the structure of the tournament and the fact that he placed highly and won his initial round. As the matchup goes, it does seem to favor Reid by at least a little bit, right?
Certainly. You would much rather be on the vampire side of things just because it's a low-to-the-ground creature deck, which is exactly what Ben does not want to face. That said, you know, getting to being essentially up a match already is a pretty big deal.
Right. Absolutely, and that had a lot to do with both of the decks that they chose, right? Because, of course, Ben was tuning a deck because he knew he'd be playing Andrea Mengucci and really suspected he'd be on Esper Control, so really wanted Andrea to win that last match that we saw in the lower finals, but that's not how it panned out. Reid's there with the Orzhov Vampires, which he selected to be more well-rounded.
Yeah, he took that shot. It worked, right? I mean, he metagamed for what he knew, which was, I'm going to play this person, and then he made his prediction, and he was correct. Now he has to hang on for the ride, because he is now in the portion of the field that he was not metagaming against specifically, and in fact, would not choose mono blue against this deck if he had known that that would be the case.
No, but it did get him straight to the grand finals, so without further ado, let's see what happens with the future inductee of the Hall of Fame, Reid Duke, and Ben Stark.
All right, let's get underway here in our opener for the grand final. How does this look? Well, that's a lot of one-drops.
4 1-drops and 3 lands is basically perfect against mono blue. Add to that Ben Stark, yeah, a little light on Curious Obsession over there. Doesn't have one, so Reid's going to get to curve out. Flipping Legion's Landing on turn 3 here is a huge boon. Though, it's funny, the way he sequenced actually is going to let Ben spell pierce one of those Legion's Landings.
Oh, funny.
So now Ben, well, Ben also may not play Terramander this turn. He might just leave up Wizard's Retort, but it looks like I see that Terramander disappearing, so.
Yeah, that is your telltale sign. He is going to run out Terramander and leave back Siren Stormtamer. Ouch. Already not what he wants to be doing.
Yeah, he is offering the trade here, and Reid has to think, and at this point, Reid's going to decide whether he wants to trade off or not. But by playing Legion's Landing first, if it gets spell pierced, he has more of an incentive to trade because he already knows he's not going to be able to flip it next turn.
Right. And it resolves.
Ben
so
did
Ben
not spell pierce
not to spell pierce. He really wants his trade to happen. Of course, Knight of the Ebon Legion cannot be spell pierced, and now Reid is incentivized to not attack so he can transform Legion's Landing next turn. He passes a turn back off the top of the library from Ben.
I'm really surprised Ben did not spell pierce that Legion's Landing. Must have thought it was bait and wanted to, save it for a potential Sorin next turn. Though Ben would have had Wizard's Retort up at that point.
Right, strange. Potential Sorin next turn just became very real Sorin's next turn. As you mentioned, though, Ben with multiple options here with Spell Pierce Retort even has a Brineborn Cutthroat in his hand now as well.
Also has to consider something like, yeah, that Cutthroat. Reid has to decide whether he is worried about that coming in to play an ambushing, but flipping Legion's Landing, getting you an extra land, especially one with such a potent ability as Adanto, really good reward here for getting to attack with 3 creatures. And if Ben did play that Cutthroat, he would leave himself open to the Sorin. But at this point, Reid is deciding, does he want to run out the Sorin? Does he want to just pump Knight of Ebon Legion? Does he want to potentially just activate Adanto and play around Wizard's Retort entirely? All the options are on Reid's side of the board. Ben's under, not really pressuring Reid at all, and has nothing. He doesn't have Tempest Gen or Curious Obsession, the 2 most powerful things this deck does.
Now, if you were in Reid's seat, would you assume that he doesn't have Spell Pierce based on the fact that you resolved that Legion's Landing last turn?
I would assume that Ben doesn't have Spell Pierce, but I would not assume that there isn't a Wizard's Retort coming.
Of course, that is the card that Reid is actually focused on here. So this, in this case, kind of is bait. He's going to run out of Legion's Landing here just to get that creature out. And okay, fine, Sorin it is. And now we can see a Spell Pierce take out one of the best cards on Reid's side, though. I'll tell you what, even with that going away, look at next turn for Duke.
Yeah,
Play Champion of Dusk, draw 4. It's not bad.
Well, at this point, the Champion of Dusk may not happen because of that Wizard's Retort. But see, the thing is, Ben's, doing what his deck's supposed to do. Oh, he's gonna just tap out for Tempest. Well, in that case, Champion's gonna come down. Though Reid's likely gonna want to attack with Knight of the Ebon Legion before tapping out here. And even though Ben is successfully, attacking with a 1/1, countering some spells, Reid's deck is just putting too much on the board for that to really help. So that is why Ben felt compelled to tap out for Tempest. It's not going to do it against a new hand of 4 more cards here. Plus, the 2 tokens have lifelink. That adds up pretty quickly.
Right. Wow, he drew all spells off of his Champion of Dusk also. Goodness sakes, just reloads the full 4.
Yeah, and this is why this matchup is tough. Ben was a Curious Obsession away from having a really good draw, but even had a couple early creatures, a couple counters, and the game isn't coming out to being close at all.
Right. So Ben attempting to take advantage of the fact that the Champion of Dusk did cost Reid 4 life on that turn, and he can set up for lethal the next turn in the air, but Sanctum Seeker looks to put a major wrench in the works, and let's not forget the lifelink that you mentioned as well from those 2 vampires. So close for Ben, with an island, he could have 5, 10, 11 power in the air.
But Reid is just going to gain way too much life off this attack.
Yeah.
And Reid's going to throw away a Knight of the Ebon Legion here. He's actually even going to get an extra land off the second Adanto flipping.
Cute.
But even throwing away Knight of the Ebon Legion here still is going to put Reid up to 14 here and out of reach of basically anything Ben can assemble.
Yeah, there was just no way to race here if you were sitting in Stark's seat. He, didn't really have an option.
And just in case, Reid can even play Sky Marcher Aspirant, which will have the City's Blessing, which will be able to block a Tempest Djinn if need be.
As well as another Legion's Landing. Just keep running them out there.
Yeah, but Reid is, I think, a little more likely just to play the Vicious Conquistador instead.
Oh.
Can't get Spell Pierced and does a little bit of extra damage here.
Yeah, at this point with his 14 life point cushion here, he could probably afford it.
Because it's not even like, Reid is maybe considering, it looks like he's going to run the Legion's Landing.
Yeah,
I guess the lifelink is a little extra. Reid is considering, whether Terramander can potentially flip and, what if Ben had end of turn opt, untap, play a land, flip Terramander, attack, but, with the Sky Marcher out, this could still just chump. And Ben looks to be extremely dead here. This is 6 points of life drain before blocks even happen.
Yeah, Sanctum Seeker is an okay Magic card, I suppose.
There are matchups where it shines. I mean, we saw Reid take them out against Andrea, right? Because against Esper, it's just a 4-mana kind of a do-nothing, because if you have a big board, you're winning. Here, it was the whole game, though. Here, it gave Reid a ton of extra life, dealt a bunch of damage, and then just threatens lethal on the following turn.
Ben finds that island does not attack in the air, passes a turn back, but it looks like that's about it. He can make a 4th blocker at instant speed.
And that still leaves Ben at 1 with 6 attackers versus 4 blockers. Ben would need something like a Merfolk Trickster, but once Reid declares attackers and a Trickster isn't forthcoming, that kind of shuts the door on that.
Exactly. So Reid just running the numbers really quickly here, but it looks like we're just going to see an attack all and put a whole bunch of triggers on the stack and then a concession from Stark.
And Reid, optimizing, putting that Legion's Landing last. You might want to make a token with Adanto before you flip it,
There you go. And that's going to do it. Game number 1 goes to Reid Duke.
Reid just 1 game away from getting to play another match.
Yes. So what can Ben do here? One of the things that that you have to give up when you decide to play a mono-colored deck and get the advantages of having fewer lands and only 1 color and all that kind of stuff is your sideboard usually suffers a lot. You just don't have that much flexibility on cards you can bring in, and we kind of see that here. It's a very Very one-note deck here from Ben.
Well, Ben does get a really powerful card in Entrancing Melody, because even though it's a little expensive, first of all, for blue-blue, you can steal a vampire token. So stealing a token from Legion's Landing is already a pretty big swing. And then second, just paying 4 mana to steal an Adonto's Vanguard or paying 3 mana to steal like a Skymarcher Aspirant, these are all pretty big swings on the board. So, so Entrancing Melody is one of the cards Reid is the most afraid of. But that said, I would still rather be on Reid's side, even with those sideboard options.
All right, take a look at the opener here. Triple Sorin, Knight, Legion's Landing, and a pair of lands.
Yeah,
it's his best card, theoretically, so sure.
Plus, if Reid draws another 1-drop here, then he's going to be able to rattle off a very quick Legion's Landing. So he's going to lead with that Knight, and he's just really hoping, can I draw another Knight, a Legion's Landing, a Skymarcher, a Vicious Conquistador, any of those things to have the triple 1-drop draw.
This time, though, we do see Curious Obsession and the 1-mana creature here from Stark, so this is what he's supposed to be doing.
Definitely, and this is the kind of draw Ben's going to need. On the play, attacking with a 2/2 Spectral Sailor, drawing a card.
Oh, he did not find a way to protect his Spectral Sailor, though. Now, there doesn't seem to be a removal spell in sight, but that 1-drop did come off the top of the library like you described, Luis.
And so what that's going to mean now is that Reid gets to play Legion's Landing. Ben doesn't have the Spell Pierce. I think Ben may have even sided them out. And then next turn, Reid is going to be able to play a Sorin. And if Ben wants to keep the Spectral Sailor alive, he's going to have to keep Wizard's Retort up, which means not deploying Tempest Djinn. And even though Ben's drawing 2 cards a turn, look at Reid's forces. Like he's attacking for a lot of damage.
Yeah, he really needs to see a dive down or something here. No, it's just another land off the top. It does give him access to a 3/4 Tempest Djinn that's going to be a 4/4 next turn, but he's basically given up on the Spectral Sailor to any removal spell at this point.
So now Reid has a decision. He can flip the Legion's Landing by attacking with all 3. Like if he plays a land, he attacks with all 3. Ben is forced. He can't block the Knights, the Ebon Legion with Tempest Djinn. Otherwise, Reid pumps it and Ben loses the Djinn. But if Reid loses the token, then he doesn't have anything to throw with Sorin. So Reid might not want to do that. On the other hand, he now has 4 mana if he flips, which means he gets to go Vicious Conquistador, play Sorin, sack Conquistador, kill Spectral Sailor, and now we've got 2 Knights that have been Legion fighting against a Tempest Djinn, which is still pretty good for Ben.
Not too bad, yeah.
I mean, looking at these lists, Reid only has 3 ways to kill Tempest Djinns. He's got Mortify, 2 Baffling Ends. That's it.
Wow, clunky. All right, yep, Reid's in there. Transforms. That's going to give him access to the 3 mana he needs for Knight of the Ebon Legion to prevent Ben from making a reasonable block on it, so he's just going to have to block the 1/1. Couple of damage comes through.
Oh, you know what Reid could do? He could actually just kill the Tempest Djinn.
Oh, sure. It did take a damage here.
Yeah.
Which one's more important? I don't actually know at this point.
It's actually, I think, fairly close.
Right, like drawing extra cards every turn is pretty bad, but Tempest Djinn is kind of the big payoff.
Yeah.
And he's going to go for the Djinn.
I kind of like that. I actually think that play ends up working better because Reid is not playing a game of who has more cards. He's playing a game of who's winning this race.
Yes.
And plus, this leaves Reid the option of killing the Spectral Sailor next turn with that Sorin potentially.
So 1 extra card for Ben Stark off of it, but he also keeps his Sorin around. I mean, he does have 3. But now he has kind of the combo where he can activate Adonto the first 4 to just chuck the vampire wherever he wants.
Merfolk Trickster into Wizard's Retort or Essence Capture is a pretty nice little set of plays this turn.
Yeah. As it stands, Reid doesn't actually need to cast anything.
He does not. And he's not likely to cast that Sorin this turn either.
Right.
So the question is, how much does Reid want to play around something like Dive Down? So Ben can also just let Reid attack with and play Merfolk Trickster before blocks to try to threaten. Is Reid going to use?
He's going to, okay, ability on the stack. Make a thing.
And then this way, see if Ben wants to do something, the Sorin ability is already on the stack.
Yeah, he's going to go for it.
And Merfolk Trickster can't stop a vampire from being a vampire. That is not an ability.
Right.
So So at this point, I think by doing this, Reid has also decided potentially not attacking with the Knights of the Ebon Legion and not getting hit by Merfolk Trickster. That was a really good turn for Reid.
Wow, insane turn from Reid Duke here. Also, Ben choosing not to play anything thus far. He's just sitting there waiting on that Trickster. And look at Reid.
Yeah. Love it.
Oh, so sick from Reid Duke. And there's the Merfolk Trickster where Ben's like, come on.
Well, now Ben does get to play a Tempest Djinn with multiple counter backup, and Reid is kind of going to have to be in the position of, can I win the race with just these Knights and basically not resolving anything new? The answer, though, I think is yes. You give a Knight lifelink, you pump it. Yeah, Reid drew a 6 land, so now you get to go like, Sorin plus a Knight, play a land, attack with both Knights, and
then one of them's going to get through, and then
the both Knights
grow. Yeah, then it's just going to get completely out of hand here. So this is Reid Duke really moving into the final stages of this first match here and looking like he's going to force a second.
And then now Reid is looking, does Ben have any bounce spells at all? And the answer is no, because Reid has to decide, do you want to pump the lifelink Knight or twice, or are you worried about something bad happening? But it doesn't even look like anything bad can happen.
Yeah, it's the one with the counter on it. It's more valuable by default. But yeah, with nothing bad happening, the race completely out of hand now. 27 is his life total, and then there's triggers for both. And Ben Stark just can't go punch for punch with this type of power.
I mean, Ben's hand is such that Reid will never resolve another spell this game. Reid's board is such that he does not need to.
He doesn't need to, yeah.
And Ben got a little unlucky in that regard. Had Reid had a hand of anything other than 2 more Sorins, he would have been tempted into playing spells, right? He would have been saying like, well, I drew a Baffling End, or I drew a Champion of Dusk, I should play these cards. But Ben would be able to just counter them. Though I guess Champion, Reid would actually just put into play with Sorin. But
sure. But it's still a worst case for him to be like, sure, I'll just dump all my mana into these Knights and pass
I got nothing better to do, and Ben is sitting on a bunch of counter spells. Well, there's the Baffling End, so...
A temptation, perhaps, for Duke, though he can represent lethal here, force some blocks.
And Siren Storm Tamer countering Baffling End on the board means he just has less incentive to play it anyway. Yeah. So both Knights are lethal. Ben, Reid knows that Ben has no bounce spells, so Reid's like, all right, kill both your things.
Yeah.
Now here I think there's a decent chance we see Reid going to play some spells. He can like lead with a Baffling End. Ben's assuredly going to have to counter it here with Wizard's Retort. And then Reid gets to play Sorin, and it's not something that Ben can counter because Essence Capture won't stop it.
Can't capture it.
Reid could also just use a Danto instead, which looks like what he's opting to do.
Yeah.
But Ben effectively can't win this game.
And he knows that, and he's going to scoop him up. So that is the first match here. Going to Reid Duke.
Oh boy, wow, all right. So coming up from the lower bracket for Reid Duke, just one more match to make it to day 2, auto into day 2 of Mythic Championship 5.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about how he had the math was against him from the perspective of needing to win 2 matches. Well, he did. He won the first one. Now the math is very much in his favor as the favorite. I mean, you could see how this played out. Also, that play from Reid was nice.
Yeah, he did a really good job of playing around the cards Ben had, and Mono Blue's a tricky deck, but remember, Reid made top 8 of a Mythic Championship with the Mono Blue deck. Reid has experience playing this deck, which is invaluable when you play against it, and you know what kinds of plays they like to make, what they're representing. So Reid was able to use that knowledge very effectively.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love watching a move that seems so obvious to us, and then you just see that expert, but you're forgetting what I know might be in their hand.
Yep.
Yeah, that's how you get in the Hall of Fame, people. All right, well, there is another match that's all geared up and ready to go, so let's jump right in and see how it all shakes out.
Okay, we got our decider here. It all comes down to one match between Ben Stark and Reid Duke, and Reid's got to ship that one back. A one-lander. Uh-oh, another one-lander.
This one's so close, too, because a plains instead of any card in your hand, and you're in pretty good shape there, but I don't think that you can keep this hand. Especially with the London Mulligan, where you get to draw another set of 7 and put 2 back, you can still end up with a solid hand like this one. So Ben looks like he mulliganed to 6 as well here. Reid's going to go to 5.
Does Reid keep Sanctum Seeker in a hand like this? He already has 3 lands. Is it just...
Well, Reid has to put 2 cards back. One of them almost assuredly has to be a swamp. The question is...
Then you do put the Seeker back.
Do you keep... Yeah, do you keep Sanctum Seeker, or do you keep over like a Sky Marcher Aspirant? And the answer, I think, correctly, though regretfully, is that no, you can't do that.
With only the 2 lands, you can't do it. So those go away, but he does have certainly a functional hand here.
Oh.
Kicks things off with Sky Marcher Aspirant.
More than functional, I mean, this is a pretty good aggressive hand, though Merfolk Trickster is just so good against a Danto Vanguard. So you let them attack, you play Trickster. Not only does Vanguard become a 1/1 because the +2/+0 is part of its text box, it also no longer becomes indestructible.
Oh, you just get to eat it?
So even if they pay 4 life in response, it still just becomes a 1/1 and does not have indestructible, loses all abilities.
By the way, you can see how good this matchup is in Reid's favor. Ben just traded. He has Curious Obsession ×2 in his hand, and he traded off for a 2/1.
Yeah, he sure did.
With no creature backup other than the Trickster. It's like...
Legion
this
Lieutenant
does actually change things.
Was a very good draw, because now Ben still has the Trickster option, but now it trades for the Vanguard because the Lieutenant's pump still persists.
Yeah, that's a big deal when you have 2 Curious Obsession in your hand.
Well, I think this game would have just been over had Reid had to attack Vanguard and die into a Trickster. Instead, Ben is going to play Trickster, tap down Vanguard, and then start loading it up with an Obsession or 2. Ben would have loved to draw a land here, because had he drawn a land, he could just safely play both Obsessions and attack and have dive down up. Instead, he's just going to play 1.
So in an act of cowardice, he only plays 1. Draws a land? No, he's paid off for it. Although he could still find one with an opt at this point. There it is. So now he gets to leave up dive down. He also has the option of playing opt if he'd liked.
Though, Reid has the option of leaving back a Danto Vanguard as well. Because it can just block the Trickster and become indestructible. Though, also, Reid is going to resolve 2 creatures here because we know Ben can't counter either Legion's Landing or the Conquistador, which leaves Reid with a 2/2 and a 2/3, which are also pretty solid blockers for that Merfolk Trickster. Remember, if the Trickster doesn't attack, the Curious Obsession does fall off.
Right, it's a big deal. Generally speaking, Ben much prefers to have those Curious Obsessions on one of his flyers. He actually doesn't have that many creatures down on the ground. But the way this draw played out, he traded off his flyer and then played the Trickster, so that's kind of how it panned out for him.
And you know what? Legion Lieutenant, one of Reid's best cards in this matchup, because Ben just can't remove it from the board. And right now, look, it's essentially acting as a 5/5, right? It's a 2/2 that's distributing +3/+3 of other stats.
Yeah, it really has changed the whole way this game played out. I mean, that Merfolk Trickster blowout you described ended up going away, and it's dominating the board on top of it.
And look, Ben's drawn a 3rd Curious Obsession, but unfortunately having them on the Trickster does not do much for Ben. Still, Reid is really short on cards because he mulled to 5. And that Mortifying hand is not going to do much against that dive down. At some point, I think that dive down is likely going to be countering the Mortify. So this game's far from over, but it looked for a second like Ben is going to run away with the game, and that's just not the case.
So is Ben just forced to attack here anyway, and just force a trade of some sort?
So,
no blocks.
Reid's just going for an offense here. He's not going to block.
He's just going to try to race as hard as possible.
Ben is pretty happy with that. I think Ben would have been unhappy if there had been a double block there.
Curious Obsession goes on the Siren Storm Tamer, leaving dive down and a Spectral Sailor in hand. Sorry, 2 Curious Obsessions go on the Siren Storm Tamer.
So what's interesting here is Ben is heavily representing dive down by putting them all in the Storm Tamer.
Yeah.
If Reid attacks and flips Legion's Landing, has 3 mana, has the ability to cast Mortify, is Ben going to play an End Turn Spectral Sailor and tap out? Because if he does, the Mortify could get him pretty badly.
Wow.
Reid could also make a play where he attacks with everything before blockers tries to Mortify, but he's well aware of dive down. Reid's a very conservative player in general. He's not going to necessarily just lose one of the creatures, lose his Mortify to a dive down. This is a tough decision. All right, looks like Reid is going to go to the Mortify, go for the Mortify play. You see the full control.
Full control, come on there.
And this is going to work out exactly how Ben wants it. The thing is, even though it worked out exactly how Ben wants it, Ben hasn't won the game yet, though I assume drawing 3 cards off Curious Obsession next turn is probably going to be enough.
So Reid just feels like he needs to go for it, but there it is. Dive down to protect from Mortify.
also gets to block the Legion Lieutenant.
Oh, wow, yeah. So this was actually the game. I mean,
this was
like
the game.
It's not over, but this was the huge moment in this game.
Where, you know, I think even though Reid thought about this play and knew that this was a possibility, if he didn't go for this, then I think he was going to be pretty far behind. And if that did work, he would win on the spot.
Look at this. Draw 3 cards for Ben Stark. That's after getting in for a hefty hit here of 6 damage as well. And what does he found to add to the board?
I mean, Tempest Gin plus, you know, Wizard's Retort and Dive Down Up is going to be more than enough here. Though, not actually by that much.
He needs the Wizard's Retort
yeah,
for the
if he didn't have the Wizard's Retort, then actually a top deck Sorin actually puts Reid to the question here.
Yeah, Ben can't cast mana here.
Ben's casting Spectral Sailor?
He tapped out of his Wizard's Retort. That means that Reid gets to win, right?
Reid's going to win now.
Oh, man. At least 1 damage will get through. He can use Sorin to throw something.
He's got Siren Storm Tamer. Storm Tamer will actually be able to stop the Sorin.
He's able to keep up Storm Tamer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because that can protect players too.
Yeah.
So Ben had a little bit of a safety net there, not needing the Wizard's Retort. Of course, the dive down doesn't do anything against Sorin if it's targeting the player, but the Storm Tamer does. I mean, that being said, that Storm Tamer is kind of a big deal here.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have lethal anymore, right?
He does not. But Reid's going to have to sacrifice his Vicious Conquistador, so...
fair enough. Yeah. So this should do it. With Reid with no board left.
Yeah. Ben would not just die to a Sorin here without you know...
Yeah,
he
it
wouldn't...
seemed extremely out of...
Yeah.
You know, out of the blue there for him to do that, but...
Oh, he doesn't lose the Conquistador. Because Ben's going to have to sack... No, Ben can let him sack it, and then... So Ben lets him sack it, and then... No, I think he has to counter the ability... No, the ability's not targeting Ben right now. It's just on the stack.
Okay.
But Ben, I believe, will have an opportunity to counter it.
This is funny. Ben's actually asking a judge. He's got a judge call going.
Yeah, okay, so what's going to happen is Reid now has the ability to sack Vicious Conquistador. He's going to elect to do so. It's going to set up what's a reflexive trigger, which will then target Ben, at which case he can use Storm Tamer. Because Ben can't use the Storm Tamer right now.
Right.
Because there's nothing targeting him.
Yeah, the only thing on the stack is you may sacrifice a vampire.
Yes, it would be really funny if the way it got set up, Ben never had an opportunity to do this.
Yes. It would not be funny from Ben's perspective. So now there's a different ability that goes on the stack, and this is the one that Ben
I would recommend countering it.
You would. I feel confident that Ben will agree with you on that, and he does so.
So, yes, technically this isn't lethal, but Ben can actually even kill the Sorin with Tempest Gin.
And set up lethal for next turn.
And set up lethal for next turn.
What he has here.
And with 2 Wizard's Retorts in hand now.
Yeah, so that will lock up game number 1 here for Ben Stark. All Reid can do is just dump what he's got in his hand, but Ben knows he can just counter both spells no matter what they are and claim victory with lethal. And that's going to be game number 1 going to Ben Stark. It all hinged on that one big turn. And,
and you know, thinking back to the beginning of the game, had Reid gotten to keep maybe even 1 additional card, I think he would have had a pretty good shot.
Yeah, he did mull to 5 that game. Yeah, good point.
So Reid cut down on basically all his expensive cards. He added in Duresses and Legion's Ends, cut all his champions, because, you know, most of the time you're just really not in the market to have a 5-drop in your hand.
That is not what this matchup is about. Meanwhile, Ben's reading Cerulean Drake and saying, do I need this?
I mean, you can sack Cerulean Drake to counter a Duress.
Okay.
I'm not claiming that's a good sideboarding idea, but
you can do it. Once again, we see those 3 copies of Entrancing Melody coming in. You mentioned that as kind of a key card.
Yeah, Entrancing Melody, one of Ben's best ways to kind of get an advantage. And then, yep, you see both players just lowering their curve. Ben taking out all the counter spells, though Entrancing Melodies are expensive. Reid taking out all his 5-drops, some of his 4-drops. They just want to get as much stuff in play as possible and trade up and use as many 1-mana spells as possible. Both have access to 21 mana spells. Ben actually has 24, but 4 of them are ops, which kind of don't count. So the other 20 are ones that affect
like action spells.
Yeah. Well, here we go. I mean,
here's the 1-drops that you talked about coming into the match. This isn't exciting, but
no, this is actually a kind of mediocre hand. Like, I do think you're going to want to end up keeping it. But imagine the Sky Marcher gets trades off with Ben's 1-drop. Yeah, you're not loving how that plays out. On the other hand, Ben is a pretty land-heavy hand. In fact, both players do. So it's going to come as to who can draw more action here.
More 1-drops for Reid Duke. He draws a second copy of Vicious Conquistador. Once again, Ben makes the same play of trading off his Storm Tamer.
And we knew he was going to do that based on previous games.
Exactly. So there's Sky Marcher Aspirant followed up by Vicious Conquistador, and the pressure is on. Passes the turn back to Ben. What does Ben come up with here? He's got Opt-in Spectral Sailor. He also does have Essence Capture, though. Have to be something special.
So Reid thinking here. He has a couple different options. He could lead with Vicious Conquistador to see if it gets Essence captured. Not that he's necessarily thinking about that card. And Reid, out of fear of Merfolk Trickster, is not attacking with the Conquistador. This is part of the advantage you get as playing this mono blue deck.
That's right. And, Reid expertly playing around it there in the last match here. He gives up a couple of damage by doing so. But he clearly respects the possibility.
And Reid's out of gas now.
Yeah,
he has his 2 1-2s in play, that's all. Ben has a pretty barren hand as well, so if Ben can opt into like a Tempest Gen or something along those lines, he'll be pretty happy.
Cutthroat's okay, Spell Pierce not so much. So no, Ben didn't really find anything amazing here himself. And a land off the top of the library for Reid says that things are going to stay status quo. The question is, does he actually start attacking? I mean, nothing's really changed from his perspective as far as the possibility of a trickster goes.
And, looking at, for those of you trying to get a little bit more used to the arena interface, when Reid goes to combat, he's going to see that Ben has something he could play, which is Brindborn Cutthroat. So that further will make Reid think that there's a Merfolk Trickster lurking in the wings.
But Reid says, I'm not going to win by sitting here, and he's going to send in both Vicious Conquistadors and hope that he doesn't see a trickster on the other side, and he doesn't. And interestingly, Ben decides not to trade off as well. So he's going to cast the Cutthroat at the end step, then draw his card.
Opt was a really good draw, because now Ben can buff that Cutthroat at instant speed on Reid's turn. So, and Reid wants to draw a non-creature spell and not get Spell Pierce. So like a Sorin would still work. You'd play his 5th land first. But that Essence Capture, Ben's got a pretty big advantage here. Reid's flooded out a little bit, and even though Ben also has more lands than he would like, Ben is going to have a slightly bigger creature when the dust settles.
Yeah, Ben's creature is actually going to be kind of huge, right? Like, he can go Essence Capture, get 2 counters, and opt to get another.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Reid is going to attack first here, while the trade looks like it's still good, though, as we know, that's not actually the case. Opt puts a counter on the Cutthroat, and let's see what he can find with it as well. A Dive Down.
Dive Down just as insurance, just in case Reid draws Legion's End or Mortify, something along those lines.
But he gets to eat up a Vicious Conquistador here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Ben use Essence Capture on a Danto Vanguard, and this Brindborn Cutthroat is huge. Look at this thing.
It's about to be a 5/4.
It was a 2/1 like a minute ago. Now he's got double Dive Down. Can he just start bashing with the thing and just race?
Oh, yeah. On the other hand, if Reid draws a succession of creatures here, like Sanctum Seeker would actually be a pretty good draw, then he could get himself back into it. Though Legion's Landing could also resolve here.
Reid has peaked at 2 mana.
Yeah.
This game, every other card's been 1. Well, he doesn't win this race.
I like Ben using Spell Pierce here just to get a counter on that Cutthroat, because you're at this point you're never going to Spell Pierce.
Right, you're looking at 5 lands against Sorin being your most likely Spell Pierce candidate. So smart by Ben, and that Cutthroat is now a 6/5, and out of gas here for Reid Duke. Plays his last card, triple Dive Down to protect.
This actually is not necessarily that bad for Reid, because if he can draw another creature here, it's critical he draws something. He's behind. But if he draws another creature here, he can threaten to flip Legion's Landing and then not get hit by that Cutthroat anymore. And now he's in dire straits, because now Reid's going to be forced to chump block. And even though Ben doesn't have anything else, like at this point the Brindborn Cutthroat's just going to do too much.
Right, because now Reid will never have that chance to actually get in and transform. Here comes the last non-lethal attack for the Brineborn Cutthroat, but it is going to be, we call it the Abyss, right? You have to throw a creature in front of it every turn, and another land off the top of the library for Reid Duke means that things are looking very good for Ben Stark. He only needed to win one of these matches to get the job done. With a game win under his belt here in match number 2, he looks like he's in prime position to finish things off.
And Ben's starting to fire off some dive downs just to prevent a little bit of damage. He's got so many dive downs, it does not really matter. And look, when you draw 8 lands and all spells that cost 1, you run out of cards really fast.
And there's game right there. Merfolk Trickster against Reid with no cards in hand clears the way for Ben Stark. So Ben, he did actually lose a match here in our grand final, but he cruises to the finish here and beats a tough matchup and a tough opponent to take down victory here in the Ruby division.
Well, congratulations to Ben Stark. That is, as you said, a very big accomplishment, and Reid didn't make it easy.
Yeah, he's going to be stoked on that too, because Ben loves himself some value,
Oh yeah, lots of value plays there.
Yeah.
Really, really cool to watch. Wow, I thought Reid might have had it because the vampires are technically usually a more powerful deck, but all those lands, all that flooding. Yeah,
and we saw that, we talked about it before. It's hard to win multiple times. The more matches you have to win, the harder it gets. It's not just about the percentages on one match. And that kind of showed here, right? It was just he flooded out a bit there. He had kind of one of those flat draws, that he didn't really get to do the things that he wanted. And Ben did, and he took it down. That first game was super close, too.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, it's all magic, so you never know what's going to happen. We do have the interview with Ben Stark and Paul Cheon.
Hello, everybody. I am here with the winner of the Ruby division, Ben Stark. Congratulations.
Thanks.
When we saw that first match, that kind of went exactly how you kind of described it. You were saying how the Vampires deck can get off to those really extremely aggressive starts, and it's really hard to keep up with them. But you were able to take it in the second match.
I mean, Reid's draws were just horrendous. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I just got extremely lucky. He mulled to like 5 in game 1 and then drew 10 lands in game 2. My draws weren't great either, but still, I think that, like I said, Blue has a lot of really good matchups, but the reason that you don't see people playing that deck is because of Vampires, and I feel like I just got extremely lucky.
Yeah, I mean, even in that second match, the first game, he mulliganed to 5, and it still felt like it was somewhat competitive from Reid's side.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like I said, I mulled to 6, so it's he only took 1 more mulligan than me, and my draw wasn't very good either. But it was still competitive, and like I said, I mean, I just think that matchup was horrible. I don't regret my deck choice. I got Andrea on Esper like I predicted, and then after that, Reid had to beat Ray and Andrea to get back to get to play me. And I mean, I didn't know Reid was going to submit Vampires, but I feel like, that was Reid's to win. And I just got extremely lucky is all that happened.
Yeah, and there was a moment there in one of the matches. I mean, at least for me, when I was initially watching, there was a bit of confusion with that lethal what looked like a lethal Sorin activation, and you with that Siren Stormtamer in play. I know you were just trying to make sure you were extremely careful there, just to make sure that you could sacrifice and counter the right ability. Yeah,
so I mean, I knew you could counter Sorin's ability with it, or I wouldn't have even flashed in the 1/1 because I could have just blocked with the Tempest Shin and went to 1 and had Wizard's Retort up for Sorin. But I forgot whether you have to target the trigger when the Sorin gets plussed, or the trigger when the Vampire gets sacrificed. And of course, this is literally game determining. If I counter that trigger, I'm going to win this game. And if I do not counter that trigger, I'm going to lose this game, right? So I just figured I'd stop and call a judge, so to speak, and try and, get the answer.
Of course, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so you are the winner of the Ruby division. And if anybody, I think, can explain what it really means, maybe even mathematically, why this win is so important, could you just kind of briefly tell the audience, what exactly does this mean?
I mean, it is truly huge. So the Arena Mythics are smaller, and the prizes are huge, both in terms of Mythic points and in terms of money. And as we all know, Magic's a high variance game, but getting to start in day 2 in the top 24 or 16 or something is huge. I mean, you're talking about the worst finish you can have, even if you like 0-3 or something, is basically a good finish where you're going to get a bunch of money and mythic points. And given with this 6-1 that I had in the Swiss of this round, I'm still not having a good year in the MPL in terms of points, but now I'm kind of like looking in. So getting a start in completing, winning this division, getting a start in day 2 of the Arena Mythic means I'm going to get a ton of mythic points from this, even if I do poorly. And that's going to put me right back in the hunt to, make the MPL again next year. So, I mean, for me particularly, this couldn't be bigger. And in general, this is just worth a ton.
Yeah, plus not only that, I mean, people talk about kind of playing in a Magic event. It is mentally exhausting, right? And the fact that you just get to bypass that first day and not have to worry about that and just be fresh for the second day, there's a lot of value there.
Oh, yeah. Especially for me, that's a problem that I have like nowadays, being 35 and not 20 anymore. I find myself generally playing a lot better in the early rounds of days and in the beginning of tournaments. So getting to sleep in, not play Magic, keep my mind fresh and relaxed, and then just show up for day 2 to play 6 matches or something is awesome. Like, I'm very, very fortunate. I think that, I did a really good job metagaming for the Swiss. I really did earn that. Like, my red list was fantastic for that division. But here, I feel like I just got really lucky. So I'm extremely fortunate right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild that the whole narrative for the past few weeks was Kethis and how dominant that deck was. And it feels like your choice to play mono red that was specifically built to beat Kethis kind of almost single-handedly prevented anybody from actually wanting to submit Kethis in the top 4.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing about the Kethis meta is like, you can't play mid-range decks, right? You can't play like Jade Light Ranger in a Kethis meta. You're going to cast Jade Light Ranger and they're just going to go off, right? So, those Jade Light Ranger type decks, Rule, Soul Tie, Green Black Barons, those are the decks that really crush mono red. Meanwhile, if you take, like I did with the mono red deck, and take Chain Whirlers out and put in Scorch Spitters, you become a lot faster and you go under control in Kethis pretty well. Control decks can beat Kethis just fine, especially if they play like some Ashiok and on Mordigos and things that they have access to. So I figured that after the dominance of Kethis for the past few weeks, I figured that the MPL was going to be not all Kethis by any means, some Kethis, but then nobody would play like Jade Light Ranger. Nobody would play decks that Wild Growth Walker. Like nobody would play decks that lose to Kethis. I figured it'd be like control decks and Kethis decks. If you expect like vampires, the blue deck's unplayable. If you expect mid-range, the red deck with Scorch Spitters and no Chain Whirlers is very bad. But if you expect all Kethis and control, then the red deck is really good. And if you expect people are going to be reacting to that and not playing Kethis and things, then the blue deck can be good.
So for all of you watching, this is what goes through the mind of a Hall of Fame top tier Magic player. I mean, you just see all the leveling, all the things that go back and forth, and these are all the considerations that every single one of these players that are, were competing in the top 4 were probably thinking, which is just wild, right?
The MPL has so much at stake; it's huge. So for the past couple of weeks, while it wasn't my division playing, I've just been watching and thinking about the metagame and thinking about like what people will do to react to Kethis and all of that. So, I mean, I guess I was kind of lucky. I mean, we all have the same opportunity per division, but since my division was last, I was able to like just really think about it and work on decks and think about it and figure out like how to attack this Kethis meta.
It looks like you did a great job metagaming, especially in the round robin portion. And, again, congratulations on winning your division, earning yourself free entry into day 2 of Mythic Championship 5.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, there you have it. Words from Ben Stark, who is in fact a Hall of Famer himself.
That's about as excited as Ben gets, by the way. That was like elated Ben. Yeah, he's like, I got really lucky.
Well, yeah, you call luck, we call it skill.
I know. He always just says that. It's like, come on, dude, give yourself some credit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, he is an excellent player, and it was beautiful to watch those matches unfold. A tight victory there, but congratulations. Here's the bracket one more time. You can see Ben Stark taking home the grand finals and making it to day 2 just automatically of Mythic Championship 5. By the way, we hope you join us for that. It's October 18th to the 20th in Long Beach, my state of California. Hope you all tune in for that. And another congratulations to Reid Duke, who, though he did very well making it to the grand finals as well, the big win for Reid is being announced as the inductee into the Hall of Fame for 2019.
Yeah, he's Hall of Fame elect. Congratulations to Reid and to Ben. And, I wanted to say that about Ben, too. He's had a tough year. you know, this has not been his highest performing year. In fact, it's been one of his lower ones in a while, but it's not over, right? There's multiple Mythic championships, and this is going to give him a big boost that might propel him to a great, you know, second half of his year.
Absolutely, and that was 12 points just from the round robin for this division alone.
Okay.
6 for each of those wins.
That's
so the
really
12
good.
points is important, and then going straight to day 2 is going to get you some Mythic points as well. So
For
not
sure.
too shabby. Still in contention. All right, well, we're coming back with the MPL Weekly again in October, so make sure you check us out. And we're going to be rating MTG Nerd Girl, so stay tuned for that. She's an excellent streamer. And final thoughts on our way out here?
Yeah, it was nice seeing Ben make a good call and get rewarded for it. It's often you do the first, maybe you don't get the second.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thanks from all of us on the coverage team. I'm Becca Scott, Marshall Sutcliffe, Luis Scott-Vargas, and Seth Manfield. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.